Of the Sawbucks.
Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I'm your host, John Ryan. I can't think of a better way to finish out the week on a Friday afternoon with my two buds here, Tony Finn of Wager Talk and Rob Vino of Wager Talk as well. Tony Finn is a sports investor, if you didn't already know it, and he loves in-game betting. Rob Vino runs robvinosports.com and also the vegasoddsmachine.com, which is a pretty cool site that automatically determines where you're located and pulls up the legal books in that state. So welcome, gentlemen. It's the end of the week, and tomorrow the fun really begins.
Yeah.
How were your plays last night? I think you guys had a pretty big one going, and you were both on the same game, if I remember right, and it kind of panned out pretty big.
We had a little fight or a battle, as we typically do in our NBA tip-off show for Sawbucks, which is, for anybody young, and a term that us over 22 years old we use several times to reflect the $10 bill. That's all it is, you know. And we did. And essentially, Rob and I kind of challenged one of the co-hosts or one of the panel members to the fact that he was claiming that one team had become more defensively focused, and everything added up to being a play to the under. This is after the game, by the way. This is after the game had already steamed 4 or 5 points, Rob, right? It was open to 223. Yeah. It's up to 227. In fact, I think it closed more at 220. And so in my write-up, so in the show, I said, no, it has more to do with who they've played than what they're focusing on mentally and in practice and such, whatever little practice NBA players have right now. And I think it went over at halftime almost, which is pretty tough to do in the NBA game, right? No, at halftime, what was it? It was probably the total in the game in 229. We put some Sawbucks on it. Rob backed me. Rob jumped in on the Sawbucks. And in fact, the host of the show, Joe Pepitone, not Joe Pepitone. I'm just saying Joe Pepitone, but he got in on it because he joined Ski, and so we were supposed to have this kind of not an intervention per se, but we were supposed to have kind of a commingling and have a live spot where it highlighted and featured that little segment of our show where we all kind of were taking sides and throwing verbal insults at each other, and which is always fun. And it's good television. And so Rob sent me a little message last night. I think we got him, Tony. He already sent it to me after there's still, I don't know where we were starting the fourth quarter. It was almost over already, the totals. And I said, yeah, I think so. And he said, I think it's going to reach 260. And he was spot on. It got to 260 exactly. So then this morning I text and say, listen, when do you want to do this? Because we want to collect our Sawbucks, and we want to give ourselves some butt slaps on TV and say how good we are, But they didn't invite us. No. They didn't invite us. No. They didn't even answer me. So, Mr. Pepitone, and you know who you are. Shame on you. There you go. Wager Talk TV. Producer.
Yeah, that's a shame. But seriously, that show that they're referencing, the NBA show I watch, and
it's fun.
They make fun of my betting systems, and that's why I refuse to go on the show.
That's me. It's long before you, John. I've always called that in fun. I always say, listen, that's a cult. Do not get involved. Do not worship false idols. Stick to, And I take it a little step farther. I make fun of it only because I've had guys send me this. Listen, Tony, Team A is 25-1 when they've had 2 days of rest and they ate at McDonald's for lunch, and that's the situation today. And so I'm making fun of there's some criteria that sometimes I think they take a little too far. Maybe not. Maybe McDonald's
Well, only if
Maybe I
they
need even more
differentiate between
McDonald's.
McDonald's and Whole Foods. You know, if the team made it Whole Foods, I would think that would be a much, much worse result than McDonald's.
Consistency,
But
like a basketball, like sports consistency, John. Every time I go to McDonald's, I know exactly what I'm going to get because it's the same every single time I go, no matter what McDonald's I go to, and that's the secret to success, I guess. It is in our business. If we can find a team that's consistent, we know exactly what we're going to get, then we would rarely lose. Unfortunately, McDonald's and sports don't go hand in hand. So, enough of my gibberish in our NBA tip-off show.
definitely a good way to start out the show for sure. But I think there's a couple basketball games happening this weekend, from what I hear. So I'm pulling up the spreads here on wagertalk.com odds page and flip it over to today because we don't want to talk about yesterday's odds. Villanova and Baylor we already covered, so we're moving down to the Sunday games. And I think to recap, our Saturday best bet was probably among the consensus was probably Loyola. Am I right in saying that?
I support that. Yes, even at the number, which I think is, I think it's inflated a bit. I still support it. I don't know about Rob. I know you do, John.
Yeah,
I definitely do.
supported it. I wasn't both feet in like you guys
Yeah.
were.
Well, I released them. There you go. I just gave away. I did release them. So I released them because of some variables and some matchups that I think they have significant advantage in. That's all.
Go, Sister Jean.
Yeah, you can't bet against God. You just can't.
No,
It's not a good idea.
no, no, not at all.
But the first game on the board here, 527 and 528 is Florida State, Michigan. Mm-hmm. Michigan opened as 3.5-point favorites, and of all the line movements, this one's been pretty stable compared to the other ones. It's gone down to 2.5 at most books here in Vegas. Florida State, the total here first is 146 on the opening. It's drifted down to 143.5 at most of the places. Mm-hmm. And this is a game where I am clearly on the fence. And I know listening to you two guys break down this game, I'm going to definitely come away with a good feeling for one of the teams or I won't. But my initial lean would be Florida State. So I hear there's some wise guy money coming in on Florida State and pushing that line down closer to pick 'em by game time than going back up to 3. Is that true news?
Robbie?
Okay. Well, I'll say this. I actually did a little analysis of this game this afternoon for the Wager Talk Today show, and Teddy Covers, one of the co-hosts for this show, asked me the question. He said, "Rob, I've been all around town in Las Vegas this entire week, and I can't find a single person with Michigan money.
Wow.
Any reason that you can think of why that is? And it could be bitter LSU money. It could be anything. But for me, guys, I break it down this way, and I went to the total. And actually, when I played it last night for myself, it was 144.5, and then this morning down to 143.5. So here comes the under money. But I'll say this. Much like in an earlier game that we broke down where I thought Villanova would finally miss Connor Gillespie in that particular matchup, I think Michigan will miss Isaiah Livers when it comes to this game. They haven't really had to face a defensive-oriented team yet. They get through Texas Southern. Not really a problem to be missing one of your offensive stars because Texas Southern doesn't bring the type of defense necessary coming from the SWAC conference. And then LSU, as we know, a scoring machine, but a little light on defense as well. Certainly not an above-average defensive team. Now they come to face Florida State. And I just think that, when your second leading scorer is gone and a 43% three-point shooter at that, it's going to show up in a spot like this against this type of team. Florida State, for what it's worth, they've shot 52% from the field against NC Greensboro and Colorado. Two pretty good defensive teams, both sitting inside the top 60 as far as Ken Pom defensive efficiency ratings are concerned. Florida State, their last game, guys, they zeroed in on McKinley Wright the fourth for starters. And in general, the entire 3-point shooting outfit of Colorado, and they did shut it down. And I think they went 4 for 25 or 6 for 25 in that game was the exact number. So
6 for 25. Yes.
6 for 25. So when it comes to putting their focus on something, they have any number of ways to take any number of options out of a game. In this case, it would be 7-1 Hunter Dickinson for Michigan, who usually can have his way, but against this team with their size, with their length. Now, they're not equipped with a whole batch of 7-1s, but they're equipped with a lot of 6'9" with length, 6'10" with length, and a 7-footer plus to go with that. So Hunter Dickinson, I'm just going to give you a few things here. It's not as if he hasn't played against really good centers and really tall centers all season long. Inside the Big Ten, played against Wisconsin's Micah Potter, played against Minnesota's Liam Robbins, played against Iowa's Luka Garza. The one game where he didn't play well against a Big Ten big man was the Illinois game against Kofi Cockburn. And to me, the Illinois defense is way more representative of Florida State's defense than is Minnesota, than is Iowa, or than is Wisconsin. In that game for Hunter Dickinson against Iowa, he's 1 of 8, 6 points, only 5 rebounds. The second thing you have to try and take care of here with Michigan, in my opinion, would be Wagner, 6'9", shooter. But again, Florida State's got a multitude of long athletic wings, and the rest of the Michigan guard situation is pretty small, height-wise, 6'1", 5'11". So Florida State can take care of Michigan defensively. Here's what I see happening, guys. I think that Juwan Howard is going to slow this game down. Florida State likes pace, 89th in tempo. And I think if you look back to the NC Greensboro game, which is a team that's really deliberate, they frustrated Florida State for about 30 minutes of that contest because they were slow, they were deliberate, and they were defensive-oriented. Michigan can be slow, deliberate, and defensive-oriented. They're 9th in the nation in defensive efficiency. There's no knock on their defense here. For that reason, I think both of these defenses are going to be the best units on the floor. I think tempo is going to be slow. And 144.5, you're talking about a 73-72 game. Hey, anything can happen in college ball. We know that. But to me, if you want to put yourself in the best position to win, you don't bank on 73-72 in this game unless you're looking at overtime. So I took under 144.5. Now, as you said, John, down to 143.5. And if I had to, and I didn't play this side, but if I had to, I guess I would side with Florida State. But it would be a very, very small play because Michigan definitely has the capability to win this thing in the 65, 62, 66, 62 vicinity.
It's a great breakdown. It's making me think. Tony, what do you think? What's your take on this game?
I think that the reason there's a strong belief, as Rob just outlined, that the length of Florida State presents a problem for the shooters, the perimeter shooters for Michigan. And while they were very successful against Colorado, I want to note that Walton and Parquette, those are small guards. They're 5'11". Listen, Walton listed, I think, is 6 foot. If he's 5'11", I think he's fortunate. Is that not? I don't know if I shouldn't say Walton. Parquette. I think Parquette might be 6'3". I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm wrong about Walton. He's a 7-footer. But the guards for Wright. I'm sorry, I mean Walton. Wright. He's 6 foot, 5'11" at the best. He's their best. He's the guy they depend on a lot to shoot their 3-pointers. So I don't think the situation is exactly the same. I think Michigan is more capable. Even if you were to go to somebody like Franz Wagner, who is, what is he, guys, 6'8", 6'9", who's listed as a guard. Now that's a guy that has absolutely no issues shooting over the length of Florida State. Now, depend only on Wagner, I think, is a mistake. But I don't think I agree with Rob. Here's the situation. I don't, in any way, shape, or form, believe that this is a game that is going to be a shootout. I don't see that either. They're both capable defensively. I think that my problem I have with this game, I typically would say, listen, I'm going to fade everybody that Teddy's talked to. I'm going to fade everybody who believes in Florida State because I believe that in some other variables, be it statistical and metrics, analytical to a degree, I also believe there's some intangibles that favor Michigan. And Florida State, there's Florida State is something we haven't talked about. We've discussed talking about it. We've even had planned. We just never have the time because Tony goes on and on and on. But that is, Florida State is a deep roster, and they play 9 guys during the season for 10 minutes or more. They played 10 guys, I think, 10 minutes or more, 9 minutes or more, same thing, in this Colorado Buffalo win. And I had someone tell me, well, that's because they had such a big lead. They stretched it. That's not true. They had a 4-point lead at halftime. That's all they were at half. That's all they were ahead. So it's not like at the 10-minute mark in the second half, they felt like this is something was in the bag. I don't believe that Hamilton that he ever felt that way. And Colorado isn't a kind of team that's going to play from behind. That's the one thing you can do with Colorado. They're a good shooting team, free throw shooting team, especially. I think second best. But I like the under in this game. But I'm going to be on Michigan. There's something about this team that they've got through the COVID issue, I believe, much like I think we all agree that Baylor has. So it's nothing I'm going to put a mortgage on. Nothing I'm going to dive deep into or double up on, anything like that. But I'm a supporter of Michigan in this situation. Howard, that passion and those kids. Not that Florida State doesn't have passion, not that their fans don't deserve such, but the history of this coach and his systems has not been uber successful in the dance.
What do you think about Scotty Barnes, freshman, Florida State, obviously? From the Monteverde Academy, I think is where he's from. Going up against, I don't know if he would be matched up against Wagner or not. But that's an interesting matchup if it happens because size, they're basically the same.
Yes,
the same NBA body type. They're thick, and that would be fun to watch. And I think if I had to name an X factor as a player, it is Barnes.
Yeah, Barnes is a freshman, and Wagner is a sophomore. Does that make any difference? To a little bit, maybe. I would say that I would say this: Barnes is probably a little better athlete than Wagner. Technically, I would give Wagner the edge. I think he's pretty technically sound when he catch and shoot 6'9" guy. But I don't see a huge advantage. I don't know about you, Rob.
No, and I think to your point about depth, Tony, Leonard Hamilton has so many wing options that if one guy doesn't work, another guy's going on Wagner, And I mean, they've had a week to look at it, and they knew who their best defensive players are against that type of player. I know the other 2 guards here, the kid from Columbia, Smith, and Elijah Brooks, they're little guys. Height-wise, they're little guys.
Yes, they are.
6'1".
So, Florida State doesn't throw anybody out there in their top 9 in a rotation that's less than 6'4". So, like I said earlier, I think they'll target Dickinson and Wagner, and, the rest should be handleable. But that doesn't mean, again, that Florida State's going to have it easy on their offensive end either, because I don't think they will. And if Juwan Howard gets this game, like I think he'll try to, and, of course, I haven't talked to the guy. Juwan Howard's not calling me with his game plan. I'm just going from
he's so humble.
The most practical. I'm crazy that way. I try to put myself in coach's shoes and how would I coach the game. And if I were Michigan's head coach, without my second leading scorer and without a 43% three-point shooter, I'd make this game into a grind because I know I've got one of the best defenses in the country and I've got a big man, and I'd try to win this thing 66-62, like I said earlier. For me, that's why I'm playing it under. I don't really have a favorite on the side. Like I say, if I had to, it would be, slight lean Florida State, but man, oh man, like I say, Michigan could win this game. I mean, that's a good team that's come through a lot. We'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I do fade, not fade, but this point forward, I give no advantage. I give 0 advantage to depth. Commercials are longer. There's more commercials. Halftime's longer. Everything And teams that when they say, well, they're shorthanded, it better be talent that they're shorthanded on, because if it's wind and passion, emotion, and energy, if anyone's lacking that at this point forward in the dance, they're not going to win anyway. Shouldn't even be there.
Hey, John, real quick, because that point about depth just brings a thought to my mind. I think that it allows Leonard Hamilton in this game because he's got 45 fouls to give, where the other head coach has about 30 fouls to give. If one guy from Michigan gets into foul trouble, depth means a whole heck of a lot more in this game. And that's the only, I mean, to Tony's point, depth fatigue makes no difference. Like he's saying, timeouts are long, half times are long. Foul trouble.
That's the key. That's the caveat. I agree.
And perhaps Florida State gets them into this, wrestling match. And, God forbid, for the Michigan side, Dickinson has 2 fouls with 12 minutes left in the first half and has to go to the bench. Where Florida State can withstand that. You get my point.
Yep.
Yes, I do.
I think they did that. They were rotating on defense, I think, more so than offense. Florida State, I could be wrong, but it looked like they were just trying to overwhelm Colorado with that depth and keeping everybody possibly as fresh as possible, especially in the second half. It reminded me of the way the NFL teams will keep their defensive line as fresh as possible.
Right.
And John, to you guys, both your points here, and Rob's, and that is to those who are listening and watching. One of the keys, what Rob's suggesting too, if you also want to be physical like that, and maybe if you get someone in foul, or even try to get someone to the free throw line. Michigan's not one of those teams that you can hack a shack. Check your free throw percentages for teams, because it matters moving forward. Michigan's about a 78-80% free throw shooting team, pretty good free throw shooting team. Absolutely. If you're going to be backing a team that's not a very good free throw shooting team at this point forward, you better feel very confident that you're going to have a lead in the second half going down the stretch. My opinion.
And that's a good opinion too. Let's move on to another intriguing game here. We have UCLA against Alabama. I think 4 weeks ago, if these two teams were playing each other, I think Alabama probably would have been about an 11.5-point favorite. Now they're opened at 4.5, trading at 6.5 in the market. Total of 144 at the open. Seeing mostly 145.5, but Circa has 145. And DraftKings is 146 under, but you got to lay minus 120, which is pretty stupid to do, but they have it listed that way. I know you guys know we think the same thing. 4 weeks ago, this is a totally different animal. But I think Alabama just has way too much. And again, they're going to bring that nasty tenacity, aggressive defense, and they too have depth to rotate in. I think they have a lot more depth than UCLA. So I definitely lean Alabama here. Let's start with Tony on this game first.
I couldn't agree more for several reasons. First off, I think you need to go back. I'm not one of these. I'm not a capper, nor do I analyze games. No, I don't go back too far with a team. They'll say somebody will bring up a point that that Missouri University, they did this and that in December or early January, and I immediately disregard that almost. And when it comes to statistics and form. It's just not relevant in my equation at this point in time of the season. It's typically not relevant, period. I don't like to go back more than 2 weeks, a month at the most. Form is who you were yesterday. We're talking about what you're going to be today or tomorrow, and so. I believe wholeheartedly that you are going to be closer to what you were yesterday than what you were a month ago, whether it be good or bad. And I have strong opinions, like in the NFL season. And I know I'm going to drift away here a little bit, but it applies to college basketball. And at a certain point in time, the trade deadline for over an hour. But football, when you hit December, your team's either going to get better or they're going to get worse. They're not going to stay the same. Nothing applies. That applies to this here. And who UCLA was 2 weeks ago is who UCLA is, I believe, and that is a pedestrian team that happened to Look at the 4 games. Look how they got here. Now they are the one team that had to win. If you believe in fatigue at all, then you have to give them. You have to put some negative there because it took them 3 games to get here, where it took everyone else only 2. They had to do the first 4 games. They played in the first 4. So I think they're outsized in this game. I think they're, as far as adjusted efficiency, both offensively and defensively, they're beat. And I think this game has gone from an opening 4.5, I think, guys, right, to a 6.5 or a 7, to probably where it should be. I still am supporting Alabama in this game because UCLA is going to have to be almost play their best game they've played this year, and Alabama's going to have to be average for UCLA to win. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's turn it over to Rob and see what he's got.
Well, I think you've got a great contrast, guys, in coaching styles. Mick Cronin for years.
Yeah.
I mean, Mick Cronin is going to try and put you into a grinder, and Nate Oates doesn't want any part of a grinder with his team. Can they frustrate Alabama? Can they slow it down enough? Can they get Alabama to miss some threes early and get ahead? Iona just didn't have the horses, guys. Rick Pitino had the right idea. He just doesn't have the players to execute the idea. Mick Cronin has better athletes, and he's got the same idea. So we'll see. Alabama's shown us 2 different sides. They showed us a side against Iona where they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn until about 7 minutes left in the second half, and they broke away with a 7-0 spurt and end up winning. The 13 is somewhat deceptive in that game. They don't cover the 16. But the 13 is even a little bit deceptive because Iona they were gassed by the end of that game and had nothing left in the tank. UCLA probably not the same thing. However, Maryland is a tremendous defensive team that made UConn look absolutely silly, and Alabama came in. Remember last time we were on, guys, and I talked about how John Petty was a disaster against Iona? John Petty was not a disaster against Maryland. John Petty was great against Maryland, as were his teammates. And when they get it rolling, they're tough to stop. If they can force their will upon you, I don't think UCLA can win a track meet. So for Mick Cronin, it's got to be played one way. And I'll say this, for Alabama, I almost feel like it's got to be played one way to cover the game. If they get involved in a game in the mid-60s, even high 60s, I don't know that they cover this. And you know what? Against Iona, they didn't make it out of the 60s, right? So I guess there's a lot of guesswork here. Do you trust in Mick Cronin and his defensive style and his ability to impose will, or do you trust in Nate Oates and that Alabama will come out of the chute hitting their threes right off the bat? Because if they get behind, Alabama can be a panic team as well. But you know what? They can always rely on pressure defense, somewhat the way Arkansas can. They're a great defensive team efficiency-wise, right? I know they were top 5 in college basketball this season. So it's not like Alabama can't play defense. But I'm torn because I don't know which team is going to be able to impose their will. Tony talked about UCLA having to play more than these other teams have had to play, at least one more game. I thought it might happen in their 3rd game in 5 days against Abilene Christian, a team that defensively was going to just blitz them all out for 40 minutes. But UCLA had no problem with that team whatsoever. A team that Texas couldn't hang on to the ball against. UCLA not only hung on to the ball, but they scored and won by 20. So it's interesting. I don't think UCLA has any fear of what they're going to face defensively. And, again, it's why I don't really have a sound opinion on this game, because I just don't know which coach is going to get his team to play it the way they want to play it. And I don't know that either team will for 40 minutes, guys. I think you could see spurts where Alabama's out in the open and hitting shots, and I think you could see spurts where this game is just a tug of war, and UCLA's winning that tug of war. One good thing for UCLA was after that very first game when it looked like Johnny Juzang might be done for the tournament, he came right back next game, and he's been really good. They're young, but Tiger Campbell and Jaquez and these guys, this is a good basketball team. So I hate to leave it without a play on this game, but even the total doesn't excite me here. I thought they'd get Maryland, because if they got ahead of Maryland, I think I played first half in that game. If they got ahead, Maryland had no comeback ability. UCLA against Michigan State showed comeback ability. So I'm kind of at a loss here. I'll ride with whatever you guys think, but I just don't know which way this one's going to go.
I'll pose a question to both of you. Of
Yeah.
the teams, and this is another thing I'll look at, and we don't go back too far, but we'll go back a couple weeks. UCLA has faced Colorado, Oregon, USC, Oregon State, Michigan State, BYU, and Abilene Christian. And I'll say this: I think, well, of those teams I just mentioned, what's the best team they've faced in that group? Just off the cuff,
Say the group again.
Colorado, Oregon, USC, Oregon State, Michigan State, BYU, and AC, Abilene Christian.
Every single one made the tournament.
That's right.
I would almost say Oregon when they're healthy.
Oh, I could agree more. How about you, Rob? I agree. I agree with. I'll say Oregon as well.
Yeah, and Oregon's the most. Well, I don't know, because I would say that USC, when they're right, is
And different.
probably a shade more talented, but they're different styles. I mean,
Yes, they
Oregon
are.
certainly fits the Alabama mold.
That is my point to this whole thing, and that is
Yeah.
if you watched UCLA lose in the first round of that Pac-12 tournament, which I know both of you guys are on the East Coast, but I watch a lot of Pac-12 basketball, and it was absolutely a disgrace. I mean, that Mick Cronin doesn't defend the arc. And that they basically said, listen, Oregon, who's not tremendous in the paint, they're not going to overpower UCLA in the paint. Not this Oregon team, not Dana Altman's teams, and they're well coached, they're versed, they know where to take advantage, and it's not in the paint there. And if you look at all those games, they lost 4 straight coming into this tournament. When they faced Michigan State, they'd lost to Colorado, Oregon, USC, and Oregon State. And Oregon State shot 40% from the three-point line. Oregon State, 40% from the three-point line. Colorado only shot 35% and only won by 9 over UCLA. And USC, let's not even consider USC a three-point shooting team. Let's not even go there, because we all know that they're going to their defensive. Although they shot, listen. That's another game we're going to talk about. But they were crazy good against Kansas from the three-point line, far above their pay grade, far above their skill set. But the point here is Alabama. Can UCLA prevent Alabama from hitting threes? They haven't shown me they can. So that would be, I'd ask you guys, if Alabama shoots 38% from the three-point line, do they beat UCLA and by margin? Yes or no?
Yes, but it's a big if, because
Okay.
they don't even average that for the season.
That's
I mean,
true.
Alabama shoots a lot of threes, volume threes,
Yep.
but they're not necessarily a great accurate team shooting threes. It's NATO's style, right? Let's go quick, let's shoot threes. And so, yeah, if they do that, Tone, they're going to win this ball game, and it goes over the total.
And that's a very good point, because they're better. Nate's team is one of the best in Division I believe, at defending the three-point line. I think they held under 30% on the season. Am I right about that? Not that UCLA shoots a bunch of threes, but I just think UCLA is going to get nothing from their backcourt. And if they don't get anything from the backcourt because of the way Alabama plays, and Alabama hits their season average 36% from the three, I think they not only win this, I think they win it. I think they win it impressively, if that means anything to anyone listening.
It means something to
My
me.
wife says I'm crazy.
If I take the reverse of what you said early, Tone, where you said you don't want to go too far back, but I'll say this:
Right.
if we do go all the way back to the beginning of the season and just take body of work,
Yeah,
I don't think there's any question which team is better.
I agree.
Alabama's the
Yeah.
better basketball.
just
team,
let's
there's
not.
no doubt about that.
Right.
But if you're looking at recency and these teams that, to my knowledge, and I tried to recall last night or the night before, if I've ever seen so many teams catch fire and come from left field and all of a sudden advance all the way through the Sweet 16. We've got so many of them, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And some of them are going home here, and maybe one of them survives this round. So, again, UCLA is not the superior talent team here. And if Alabama for a long time, guys, remember, was almost locked in as that 4th number 1 seed in this tournament, and then they fell upon some hard times, and it didn't work out for them. They wound up at 2, but they're the better team. Tony, if it goes like the Oregon game, I'm with you. I mean,
Okay.
again, good Alabama.
And we're all in agreement. Everybody out there, let's just start hammering. Let's start hammering Alabama so I can get a better price on UCLA, please. I'm just kidding. It's a joke.
I'll just add this. Like, I think with Alabama being the better team, like you guys are saying, at both ends of the court, it may be to their advantage to pick up the pace a little bit.
Oh, I think so.
Because this is a matchup that the pace is so vastly different. What is Alabama? It's top 20 in pace.
Yeah,
Well,
it's the only way they know how to play too, John. I mean, they don't.
Right.
I mean, they can survive a low-scoring game, but they're not going to thrive in a low-scoring game. If ask them to cover 6.5 in a low-scoring game, ain't going to. So that was kind of my point to begin with. The contrast in styles here and philosophies is so wide.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
You know, Mick Cronin doesn't want to do that.
No.
But
It's a top. You're right. Top 25. Right. This is a top 25 fastest team in Division One, and the bottom 25 slowest team. That's a pretty big contrast. Huh?
But Alabama, listen to this though. This is from my machine learning. So I'm not going to get off the tracks. Don't worry.
Go ahead.
There's a high probability that Alabama's going to score 81 points, and even if they score 77, those are the numbers that the models come up with. Like in football, 28 is a huge number. If Oklahoma scores more than 28, it's money. For example, same thing with this situation with Alabama. So you have 81 or more points the last 2 seasons. Alabama's 26-8. So I asked you do you think it's possible that Alabama, or do you think it's a high probability, 80% or better, that Alabama will score 80 or more in this game? Needless to say, if you do, then you should bet Alabama.
For me, it's why I don't have a play, because they could only get to 68 against Iona, and Iona doesn't have UCLA's talent, and UCLA is going to bring the same game plan Iona brought. And if they score 68 again, Pitino didn't have the athletes to pull it off. Mick Cronin might. But if they hold them the way Iona did to 68, and that thing was, I mean, Pitino got them frustrated. He got them into that grind, and they couldn't get out of their own way. So
I'll
game the handicap.
I'll be contrary to you, Rob. Here, I will say that, and again, we won't go back too far. But I think that conference games, typically when we handicap conference games, and I think you both agree that, as opposed to non-con slate for any team, you're going to have lower scoring games in conference because teams typically know each other. And it's no different than an NFL divisional games. Okay, that's my opinion. And throw out the games I mentioned to you. If you throw out USC, who won that game 64-63 against UCLA, Colorado scored 70, Oregon scored 82, Oregon State scored 83. I don't have to go any further. If those teams can score those points, that kind of shoot at that rate against UCLA and score that number, Alabama certainly can. So if that helps you, John. If you believe John, then Alabama is going to score 85 points or mid 80s, low 80s. I think you would be probably silly not to be backing Alabama minus the touchdown. Agree?
If that database that John's staring at guarantees me that Alabama is going to score 77, then give me 5 seconds and I'll go bet the game right now, Alabama.
Give me 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes and I'll mortgage the house.
I did say 80% probability.
Yeah, I mean, but the point being, just from my standpoint, is I could make a case so strong for either side that it leaves me in a quandary where I don't know who to bet. I mean, I can't go both feet in on either way. But like I say, both you're right. If Alabama shoots the way Oregon shot, Tony, they're winning the game. They're covering the game, no question. And I'm betting over as well, because that puts UCLA in catch-up mode where they'll turn up the tempo themselves, and all of a sudden you've got yourself 150-plus pretty easily in that game. And that's what Alabama wants to do. It's what UCLA doesn't want to do. And, boy, I wish I was who's that great Greek forecaster?
Greek? I don't know.
Nostradamus?
Nostradamus?
Nostradamus. There you go.
Okay.
Whatever. He is.
Well, if any of us were Nostradamus, we'd have our own island.
Absolutely.
We'd have our own island that had a moat and naked girls serving us margaritas. So we wouldn't even be on the show.
Hey, John, real quick, for me, this is one of your favorite topics here. This is a game where you bet in game.
Absolutely.
Screw your pre-flop.
There you go.
and
Yep.
play and see what happens and go from there. My
I
Good
definitely
stuff.
agree. It might be a game that I don't even bet pre-flop, but I haven't decided yet. But UCLA has 7 guys that were recruits in the top 100. 5 of the top 6 guys on the team in scoring are in that top 100, and nobody ever talks about that. So that's to their credit. But I come back to the Alabama, and not to disrespect Rob's statement about the Iona
Don't
game,
bet this game at all.
but Iona was round 1. New venue. Alabama shot like shit. They knew I had the over, which I lost badly. And this is now the Sweet 16. So, these are 20-year-olds, 19-year-old kids, and I do see like a little uptick in focus for kids that are 19 or 20. I know 5 years ago when I was 19, I was a lot more focused than I am now. But seriously, I think that's a factor too. Hey guys, we're in the round of 16 now, and we got more work to do. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
let's move on to the next game, I suppose, and that would be Creighton against Gonzaga, or a pretty darn good Creighton team is an underdog of 13.5 points, 14 at South Point, opened at 13. I don't see too many other lines that are different than that. Total is 158. Again, a game. When I see that number, I think in game, because the volatility of the swings by both teams will be severe. Severe meaning double digits. You could easily have 10-point runs by both teams in this game. But no matter what, how can you make a case to bet against Gonzaga right now? It just seems like it's a mission. For no team has won undefeated since '76, and it just seems to be part of their mission to end that drought of an undefeated team not being able to finish it off.
Yeah.
So let's start with Rob this time, I guess.
Yeah, I'll make it real easy and real quick here, guys. I like over. I know it's a big number, but I'm going to play it over. First of all, I don't see any way on God's green earth that Creighton is capable of stopping Gonzaga from scoring. I don't know what your model's going to say about this, John, but I would list them at 85. I would make that a baseline for this game. 85 out of Gonzaga. There's just no matchups that support Creighton stopping them. And again, nobody's done it all season long, so why are they going to be the first? Plenty of coaches have tried. Plenty of good teams have tried. If you go way back to the non-conference to start the season, Gonzaga played really good non-conference teams and, found their way through that pretty good on the offensive side of the floor. So I think they're going to score. And I just, Gonzaga had played really solid defense for the majority of the year, but I think in 4 of their last 6 now, they've allowed near 47% or better shooting. The only 2 times they didn't, I think it was St. Mary's and Norfolk State. And St. Mary's is by no means an offensive juggernaut. And again, once Gonzaga got ahead of St. Mary's, it's lights out for St. Mary's with the way they play. But everybody else has been able to shoot as of late. If there's one thing Creighton can do with their cast of characters, it's shoot the basketball and score. And they might not mind, guys. They might not mind pace in this game. Not that you want to get into pace with Gonzaga, but if it gets to go in that way and they can't stop it, they'll go. So I even looked at first half here. I think I saw 75. But I'm really more toward the full game over here of 158. Again, I'll put this thing in some kind of context here. I think this goes in the range of, to put it right on the number, 90-77, 89-77, something in that vicinity, which I don't think, believe me, I'm not going to get to the side with Creighton. I'm not taking 13.5 points against Gonzaga, but I just think that, to make a long story short, over in this particular contest. It's a great matchup, in my estimation, for the Gonzaga team offensively.
Tony, are you?
Yeah, I agree.
On the
I
same
agree
side?
with Rob on the total in this game. I just here's the deal. I agree with him also on the way, at least the way Creighton is built. How I believe that as Rob does. If I'm coaching Creighton, I believe that there should be no sense of ball control. There should be no tempo stall. If you're Creighton, I don't think they're a very good defensive team. I don't believe that this is a team that could slow it down and believe that they're going to out-muscle and out-defend even Gonzaga, who it doesn't have the best defensive rating, but offense affects defense, and so what they do offensively makes them better defensively how they play. Oklahoma didn't really do that. Oklahoma is a better defensive team under Lon Kruger than they were offensive team with this cast of characters. Yet they did some things during that game I thought were counter to how I believe they could win. Creighton needs to get up and down the court. They need to shoot the ball every time they have an open look that is what should be considered a high percentage shot, if there is such a thing. But you guys know what I mean, and the listeners know what I mean. And they have to hope they outscore Gonzaga, and Gonzaga misses a few more shots than they typically do. That's the only way they win this game. There's no other chance. They can't. They're not defensive enough, big enough. Their skill set does not allow them to win any other way, in my opinion. So I agree with, the number's big. I agree with Robbie. This is a game that I am on the over as well. And it's one of the two big numbers on the board this weekend, and I'm on the over in both. So good luck to the Creighton team that has been an absolute Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, as schizophrenic as any Division I team that I watched a lot of this year. That was the Creighton team. And to end all things, had a lot of drama. Not that I think the drama affected what happened late in the season, but they had some drama too before coming in the tournament with the coach and some of his verbiage.
Yeah, to your point, Tony, consistency, they ranked 333rd in the nation, and that's over the course of the season. Does the Creighton Blue Jays. Mm-hmm. And supporting Rob's, the fact that Gonzaga will have an easy time scoring, I think you can even be more bolder than that, because you guys know I like assist-to-turnover ratios.
Yeah.
Gonzaga is one of the best ball-handling teams, best passing teams in the nation. They rank 5th with a 1.533 assist-to-turnover ratio. And guess where Creighton is defensively? 201st with a 1.027. So that matchup right there alone is monumentally in favor of Gonzaga scoring at least 81. And yes, 81, and then after that it's 87. So we go to this little database thing, and Gonzaga is 46-27 when they score 81 or more points the last 3 seasons. That's not bad. It's like 64% off the top of my head.
Well, that speaks to the over too, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Because when they score 87 or more this season, they're 15-6 over.
Yeah.
When both teams score 75 or more, which that could happen, the line itself implies an 86-72 final. So both teams could score 75 or more, 9-0 to the over. And then Gonzaga, when they exceed 87 over the last 3 seasons, are 30-14.
Right.
I
think Gonzaga. Listen, 90 points isn't unreasonable for Gonzaga in this game. It's not unreasonable.
But I think based on those numbers, the over is the better bet, because the marketplace sees Gonzaga, and betting behavior by the human beings forces the line maker to add more points to Gonzaga's betting line, anticipating that the public's going to be all over them, which they are.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks of the over-under until game time. So I think the over actually has like a lot of value in it. I mean, there could easily be 180 points scored in this game.
Well, I'll put it to you this way, Tone, and I'll go to the West Coast. In that West Coast Conference this year, there were plenty of games where Gonzaga played Pacific, where they played San Francisco, where they played Portland. And those games were totaled in the 150s. I mean, if you're going to give me 155.5 against Pacific, and you're only going to give me 158.5 against Creighton, a team with 4 guys who can shoot threes and have a ton of scoring ability, I mean, to me, there's a boatload of value there. One other subtle thing here, guys.
Yeah.
Both of these teams, it's going to be their second consecutive game in Hinkle Fieldhouse. They both
Right.
played there their last game. So
add a
you
percentage.
should be
Add a
good.
percentage. You're right, Rob. Add a percentage that they're shooting. They're going to shoot better. They should. You're right.
Yep.
You're right.
And I
Good
always
point.
like saying that Hinkle Fieldhouse is where the movie Hoosiers took place.
Hinkle.
Mhm.
I always like saying that just to be,
Well, Gonzaga is one of the few teams. I think Gonzaga. I think I read somewhere. I should know these things, but I read somewhere they, as far as Division One's top 20, no one at 100 points or crossed the century mark like 3 times. And listen, crossed the century mark against Kansas.
Yeah.
Kansas, who at that time wasn't playing to the same scheme they were playing late in the season, but 102-90. Kansas scored 90 in the game. That's got to be a fun game to watch. And I don't recall it. Do you? I don't even recall it. So
it was the beginning of the season.
it was a season opener for
Yeah.
Gonzaga. Yeah.
But that leads us to our next game, too, with USC, who gave Kansas,
Yeah.
not Missouri, Kansas,
Uh,
the worst beating they ever had in the history of the NCAA tournament by double. The previous record loss was 15. USC put a 31-point pounding on them.
Mm-hmm.
And now they find themselves just 2-point favorite against Oregon with a great coach. And really, for the first time this year, they're all healthy.
yes. No. That's a good point. It's really a good point.
So
I
this
agree.
this arguably would have been a really cool Pac-12 championship game to see in the conference, but obviously we didn't have a chance to see that. But now we get it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another one of those games. 51% of the money. 51% of the tickets is on Oregon. 85% of the money. So there is a love affair with Oregon here, at least as of Friday afternoon. The under, I think here again is the total based on the money flows initially to get us started. 71% of the tickets are betting under, but 76% of the money is over, and that's a big variance. That means there's a lot of $10,000 bets out there, I would think, or at least 1,000.
I think I firmly believe there's in some fashion form, in many fashion forms, an overreaction to what USC did to Kansas. First off, the color commentators during that game, if you watched that game, a lot of people did, it expressed it accurately. And this is not the best Kansas team that Bill Self has had. In truth, it might be one of the least teams. And there's several reasons. He lost some players to the new portal when one of them, they went to Houston, playing pretty well down in Houston, guys, right? There's a lot of reasons why, but long story short in this one, that's an overreaction. USC shot a ridiculous percentage. In the first half, they couldn't miss. Everything they threw to the rim from the three-point line went in, and that's not USC. So if you're going to base this matchup that USC has this weekend on them rinsing or repeating and rinsing that whitewashing, that butt kicking they did to Kansas, I think you're making a mistake. I don't know about you guys, but in this game, I firmly, I'm again to some degree fading the Pac-12. I just am. If there's a team that I like in the Pac-12, I don't even. Dana Altman is who he is. This is the best. This is the time of year when Oregon's always at their best. They're the best right now. So you're getting the best of Oregon, and right now the best of Oregon and Dana Altman. I will take 9 out of 10 sober days over USC right now. That's worth that. That's what it's worth to me.
That game against Kansas, it is really, really rare when a college basketball team shoots better from three than their field goal percentage. So they shot 61%, I think, 57% for the game, and then shot 53% from the foul line.
Yeah.
That combination of where your highest percentage is the three, and then overall field goal percentage in that order is extraordinarily rare.
USC. It's right, John.
Yes.
USC let's repeat it loudly. USC is not a good shooting team. They are a 64% free throw shooting team. That if you want to find out what a team if they're a good shooting team, just go to their free throw shooting percentage. That is indicative. Is a correlation? Unquestionably, John. A very good point. Very good point.
What do you think, Rob?
Well, I wonder if they have to make free throws when every single guy they start is taller than every single guy Oregon starts. Oregon has to shoot 3-pointers. They're 6'6" and under.
Yeah.
And you talk about these Mobley twins
Mm-hmm.
and Drew Peterson, who's 6'8", and it could be Lob City. They played once this year.
Yep.
Oregon shot well from the three-point
They
line.
sure did.
40%. They lost by 14.
That's right.
The game was at USC, but it was played in front of no fans, so it might as well be a neutral floor.
Right.
The matchup could be a problem for Oregon defensively, and I don't know that it'll be as big of a problem for USC defensively because they guard the three-point arc real well. They've allowed a big number the first time. I'm sure head coach Andy Enfeld focuses on that this week and says, listen, we got to run them off the three-point line and see if they can beat us any other way. I don't know that they can. If Evan Mobley, who's supposed to be the number 2 draft pick behind Cade Cunningham, take your choice, if he doesn't have a big game against these guys, shame on him. That whole team, interior-wise, they should look inside, pound it in. A 2-foot shot. I know analytics will tell you threes are worth more than 2. Certainly they are. But if you're not making threes and you're making 2s, they're not worth more. So to me, it's a real contrast there. I think USC, the better defensive team. Easily. I mean, Oregon, if we want to take USC's numbers, and believe me, I got my head caved in by betting Kansas in game. I thought Kansas plus 15 at one point in that game. I said, well, they're going to make a run at some point. They never made their run.
Yeah.
But Oregon shot tremendously well against Iowa, who plays zero defense. It's a night and day defensive matchup for Oregon, certainly different here. It's a night and day size matchup. Oh, Luka Garza's a big guy for Iowa for sure. But I just see USC as controlling the boards. I see USC as a lot of lobs and dunks or points at the rim. And if they don't make free throws, which they on average don't make, I don't know that they'll be necessary in this game. Richardson, since he's come back, Oregon's been tremendous. But Richardson, Duarte, and that whole gang had better shoot lights out and defend lights out. Otherwise, I think USC's moving on. It's a big game for Andy Enfeld, guys. A guy who's been there since Dunk City with Florida Gulf Coast, and he came over here, and they really have never advanced.
Nope.
For him to get to the Elite Eight would be special. We'll see, but I like their interior matchup a little more than I like Oregon's perimeter matchup, and I like USC's defense better.
Real quickly, John.
Yes.
And Rob, in that game, the one game that USC played against Oregon, if I told you Oregon was shot they did only shoot 40% from the field that game, although they shot 41% from 3-point line, right? They were out rebounded significantly by USC, which shouldn't surprise, and significantly. But as far as assists go, USC actually had more assists, which is surprising as well. USC had more turnovers, 16-10. USC only had, as big as they are, they had 1 block. Oregon had 4. But Oregon wasn't horrible. If you just look at the stat lines, they weren't horrible in this game. Yet they lost by 14. A big reason why is the first 10 minutes of that particular game, USC got what they needed. And if they do these, and what it is they had a 15-point lead. It was 19-5, 20-5 at the 10-minute mark of that game. And if you put USC and that type of a team, long, lean, they can cheat a little bit to the 3-point line if you're playing catch up, they're going to be tough to beat. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So can we throw that game out? I guess that's my question to you. Can you throw that game out? Because Oregon can shoot over that length. I think that's the one. I think Altman, they move the ball well enough, Rob and John, that they can shoot over the length of USC. I mean, USC lost some games this year. Yeah. USC lost some games. They lost 7 games, right?
Yeah, and there's just nothing available in the paint against this team.
Right. No.
It's going to come on fast breaks and we'll see. Guys, I'm going to cut out here real quick because the phone's ringing for another radio segment. But good luck this weekend, John. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rob.
Tone,
you bet.
Let's collect our sawbucks, buddy.
Hey, okay, I'm going to leave that to you. I'll give you 10% of what you get from me. And Rob, I mean, and John, I don't know how you, but that it's one of those deals that the to mention right now the games USC lost to, or the teams they lost to, John. Connecticut, I believe, yeah, it was Connecticut, Colorado, Oregon State, Arizona, Colorado, Utah. All those teams, none of those teams are fantastic in the paint. It's not like they lost to teams that were big, brutes, physical teams. All of those teams are perimeter heavy. So it rules out anyone who says, "Listen, give me USC against a perimeter heavy team." That equation doesn't work if you. I'm not even going back very far. Let's just go back to late February. They've lost 4 games since late February. All of them. Arizona, they have some size, but they're still a perimeter team. Colorado, definitely a perimeter team. Same with Utah. And they lost to Colorado twice, which is a team that can shoot from the perimeter. So there you go.
The one thing I like, Tony, is I think I might like the under. I have time to think about it, obviously, but
Yeah.
I did a little query, by the way, while we were talking. Teams like USC that are coming off a game where their 3-point percentage was higher than their field goal percentage, which was higher than their free throw percentage. It's only happened 4 times in the NCAA tournament.
Oh.
That team actually is 4-0. But small sample size. Yeah, but it's probably meaningless. It's probably
it's not. Nothing's meaningless. I guess I would ask you, do we know who those 4 teams were?
Yes.
That's I'm really intrigued now.
Was Richmond against Vanderbilt, and now this is the game going forward.
Right.
And obviously they won and covered. They were 3-point dogs. They won 69-66 on a 135 total.
Okay.
Total pushed. Ohio State 2010 against George Mason, 98-66. 32-point win is an 11.5-point dog. Easily went over 136-point total by 28 points. Cal in 2012 against UNLV, 64-61 as a 3.5-point dog, 131 total. That went under by went under by 6.5 points. And then St. Louis against NC State in 2013. That's a 2013 season, so March of 2014.
Nice.
83-80, pushed as 3. No, they covered as 2.5-point favorites, and went over the total by 32.
Interesting.
So that's the recap. I don't know if that gives us much, but
it tells me that it says this. It's don't ignore teams that in this time of year maybe that they get hot and remain hot. Listen, we've seen teams do that. So I will say that if you believe USC is going to shoot, if you believe USC is going to stay hot and shoot 40% from the 3-point line, and you believe that, I wouldn't begrudge you for being on USC hot and heavy moving forward.
Well, USC after a game shooting 57% or better from the field, 17-3 to the under.
Yeah, well, because that is who they are, and I agree with you. That's who they are. They're a team.
So that's why I lean to the under, and maybe it might become a best bet as the next day wears on. But
listen, in Oregon, they both play about the same tempo and pace. Really, it's not. They are slower. They play slower than the average Division I team, both of them. So, if that means anything, and it does, it means something. It just depends on what your formula is for this game.
Well, even though it's the NCAA tournament, you still expect a little bit of regression from USC. I mean, 50% shooting would be regressing.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
and they could still go under.
I mean, I've seen a lot of this USC team in there, and while I can't, as you said earlier, I can't guarantee they're not going to be as good. The probability is they're not. I've seen enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's do best bets real quick, Tony, and then we'll put a bow in this thing, and we'll get on to our well, at least here in the East Coast, we have drinks now.
Yeah, well, I'm in the West Coast in Las Vegas. We have drinks anytime. There is no last call.
I knew that was going to be bad to bring up, but
there is no last call like there is in most states. So I will say this, John. I want to hear what you have to say about your best bet. Are we talking about the games we covered today? Is that what we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
the games we covered today, it's tough to nail one down. I lost my page here now. I come back to the over Gonzaga Creighton for my best bet.
Okay.
I'll even write that down so I'm accountable.
Well, I will stay in this. I think the highest rated game, according to my, all the variables, and I've spent a lot of time earlier in the week. I spent a lot of time Monday night and Tuesday morning. Because I prefer that I examine it based on the opening line, not necessarily the closing line. So, in this game, I liked Gonzaga. My strongest play at that time was Gonzaga, period, minus a 13 over Creighton. And much of it has to do liking Creighton minus 13 in this game, or Gonzaga, excuse me, it has more to do with Creighton than it has to do with Gonzaga. In fact, so if you like Gonzaga and you feel like I do about Gonzaga being the most complete team in the NCAA this year, and I have all season long, it doesn't mean they're going to win the championship. It doesn't mean it. But the way I feel about both of these and the way the numbers scream at me, I would be surprised if Gonzaga didn't win this by 20 plus, making the opening 13 a pretty strong play.
Yeah, I think so too, Tony. Assist to turnover ratio that I saw, where it was top 5 versus whatever it was, 220th.
Yeah.
For Creighton defending, and I mean, if you're going to beat Gonzaga, you got to create steals, and that's another complete story that's not likely to happen anytime soon. However, I do see a collision course coming down the road for us to talk about, and I hope this matchup happens because it would be Gonzaga and Alabama in the semifinal.
Listen, there are some matchups moving forward that I would like to see. And in truth, it probably means that I'm going to have some financial success if those matchups happen as well. So I'm all for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, Tony, I want you to be able to tell the people where they can find you and any of the special deals you got going. And before you do that, I'm telling you the truth. I'm honored to have you on the show. And
well,
Rob,
thank you.
I mean, these
you.
two guys, and all the guys at wagertalk.com, whoever you would choose is a good decision. They're honest, they're transparent, and in this industry, unfortunately, there's not enough of these guys. I'll put it that way in a positive note. So if you're thinking of investing in yourself, any of these guys are tremendous investments. There's the floor.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's nice of you to say. And let me second that. More than anything is that nobody is ever on Wager Talks ever going to tell you that they win 75% of their games. It doesn't happen, and not unless you play. Not unless they're talking about one day. And secondly, they work really hard. Everybody works hard, and you know this, John. You spent some time with us recently. Everybody's busy, and it's night and day. In fact, from here point on, right now it's only 3:00 here, 2:45 Vegas time. I will be on the air until about 3 a.m. your time. So, in fact, I do some work with Sports Grid and the legend Gabe Warrency. Which is a serious program tonight. Yeah, it's fun to do. Time. It's fun to do that with Gabe. We'll have fun tonight. I know we will. You can find me at a local tavern within a mile of my house, walking distance. That's how you can find me. At that and Wager Talk. And I'm kidding, joking around, kind of. And again, like John said, there's not really a bad choice there. There's Vegas Chris, who's outside the studio right now. He happened to stop by, who finished second in the Circa Million this year. So there's Vegas Chris. There's Rob Vino. And there's Tony Finn. There is, as we talked about earlier, Teddy Covers, a big group, and I didn't want to leave. I'm not purposely leaving anybody out because they're all they all have great work ethic and strengths in certain areas. Find out what those are. Visit wagertalk.com. And it's my honor to be here. John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll conclude today's show. For the Predictive Playbook, I'm John Ryan, and may all the wins be yours.
Take them.